Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views we hope are relevant to you. In today's show, we look at foreign interference again, tensions rising between the US and India, who deny it, and then in turn go and accuse the US of trying to bring down the Modi regime by stealth. Meanwhile, here in the UK, King Charles takes action against a British Lord of the Realm for his anti-Sikh attacks and strips him of the honour he just bestowed upon him only a few years earlier. And in the Punjab, how drugs are being deliberately weaponised once again to undermine Khalistan before it can even be established. Well, joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. Thank you for all of the amazing comments in our comment section. Keep them coming because we love to read them.
Indeed we do. And James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as usual, we will indeed be taking a look at loads of your great comments at the end of the show, which will be filling out below the video. So thank you as always for those. Right, James, let's get things started. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Deny, Angus. That seems to be the only foreign policy of response when it comes to the Modi and the BJP government. Now, whether this is in relation to the current accusations India is making against the US State Department for targeting India, or it is human rights atrocities that we know are happening throughout the country that they deny are happening. Whether it is, the foreign interference in Canada that Canada alleges, of course, that's just a bunch of lies by the Modi government. By the Canadian government towards the Modi government. So it just continues when they are talking about the $265 million Adani fraud. Of course, that's just the West making up lies that there's, that it's preposterous. It couldn't be happening. India being blamed by Bangladesh for the flooding because of the release of the water from the Indian dams. Of course, that is not India's fault either. They have no responsibility in anything. However, if you want to look at positive things in the world, they're always happy to take credit for anything they can there. And this is where we are at in terms of the world is turning on India in terms of holding them to account. It was only last year at this time that we could see a lot of progress being made when it came to international relations and foreign trade, all of these different agreements that were on the pathway to bringing the realization for India to become a developed nation. Now it seems that over the past 12 months, there has just been a steadfast of accusations against Prime Minister Narendra Modi, against the BJP government, against ministers, and very highly influential billionaires that, of course, are part of Modi's circle of friends. So it seems that the denials are starting to really wear thin, and the media is asking a lot more questions and actually demanding more answers. India, though, of course, is the #1 nation in the world for shutting down internet access. This, of course, blocks the access to reporters, journalists, and citizen journalists to get the information out to the world. It is becoming very commonplace now that the BJP government and local law enforcement in various communities lock up journalists and reporters for doing their job. They want to silence the rest of the world when it comes to any negative light that's shining on India. They, again, just want to deny, and like an ostrich, bury their head in the sand and hope that the threat goes away. But it's not. It is getting amplified. The voices are getting louder, and the international community is on to the games that India's been playing. And they obviously are not playing well because the international community is looking at them and saying, look, you have had issues with the corruption within the stock and trade industries within India. The regulators have allegedly been in on some of the frauds. Modi's closest allies, including the Adani Group, have been very enriched, going over a 10-year period from being down around 165 on the world's wealthiest, up into the very top of the list. The Adani Group has, of course, benefited from Modi's policies of privatization when it comes to things such as energy, ports, airports, and the list goes on and on. And with the farmers' protests, of course, Modi claimed no responsibility in that. He had absolutely no responsibility in the protests and the problems and the suicides of farmers or the loss of farmland. It just went on. But who was to actually gain the most in that transaction with billions of dollars of potential earning income was actually the Adani Group. And that, of course, through various challenges and other issues that came up, Modi finally was forced to backtrack on the privatization of the distribution and handling of the country's domestic growth in terms of agriculture and, of course, control over the farmlands, which would have screwed the farmers out of more and more money, reducing their leverage to actually negotiate fair prices or to keep the current system of a guaranteed basic price for different agriculture products. Again, this is very clearly and questionable actions by the Modi government that he was questioned upon. All of these different benefactors and billionaires that were benefiting directly from his policies and privatization network, which he denies. He denies any involvement there, but it's very clear, and it is going to continue to come out in the current investigations by the SEC in the United States, as well as other international organizations and financial watchdogs as well, Angus. So again, it just seems to be the Modi policy is deny, 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 and it is not getting them as far as it used to, that's for sure, Angus.
Well, let's be honest, James. I mean, India are not going to admit it, are they? I mean, of course they're going to deny it. We all know they're guilty because the evidence is just, it comes out across the world of their behaviour. And of course, unsurprisingly, they're going to deny it. But it is starting to make them look a little bit ridiculous. And when you recount, what they've been up to, the corruption, the behaviour domestically, it all smacks of something that you would expect from a banana republic out of Africa, with all due respect to Africa. This is not what we would expect from a future superpower. I mean, India is, and we often say that Narendra Modi bestrides the world stage, shaking the hands of global leaders who fate him at the G20, even invite him to sit alongside, at least on the fringe, at the G7. And yet this is a prime minister of a nation that is basically behaving like a banana republic. It's just bizarre to sort of see this, and it's really, I would say, disappointing. It's probably a euphemism to describe it. I mean, we often talk about their interference, their international interference. It's been very clumsy. It's very unsophisticated. I mean, we talk about the transnational repression, the murder of their political opponents overseas, the likes of the Khalistan movement, murdering those activists. Again, it's something that you would expect from maybe China, but at least China does it in a little bit more of a sophisticated manner, as does Russia, who've been playing, and Russia have been playing this sort of game for decades. We talk about the Cold War. They've learned to hone their foreign interference techniques down to, I would say, a much more sophisticated, much more subtle and nuanced way. And they're almost sort of, they play by the rules of the game, should we call it, of the old Cold War. India has sort of waded in almost like a belligerent teenager, trying to throw its very considerable weight around, but in a very clumsy and unsophisticated manner. And it is not fitting of what should be a potential future superpower. And domestically, we talk about the corruption. We talk about, and you mentioned it, anytime there's any trouble in India, the first thing they do is close down the internet. They close down the communications lines. We've seen it in Manipur, we've seen it in Jammu and Kashmir, we've seen it in the Punjab. Every time people start to sort of rise up and say, hang on a second, we're not happy with what's going on here, what they do, they close down the internet. Again, it's draconian, it's totalitarian. It isn't the behaviour of a normal democracy. So again, it just smacks of a banana republic. And then we come on to the whole corruption thing which you referred to, of course, Adani is really just the tip of the iceberg. And I'll again talk about corruption in one of my stories. But Indian corruption has it's exploded under the BJP regime. It's taken a much more, well, I was going to say sophisticated. That's the wrong word, actually. It's taken I would say a much grander scale. Certainly with his billionaire mates and the likes of Adani, who have been implicated clearly by global law enforcement, have been implicated with deep levels of corruption with the BJP government. And one of the stories I covered a few weeks ago was examining how Modi seems to be inextricably linked to Adani. Wherever Modi has gone internationally, shortly afterwards, Adani contracts have followed, not just for all billionaires or all Indian industry, but specifically for Adani, which just almost by implication implies that Modi has a financial hand in the benefits that Adani has reaped. So again, it all smacks of a banana republic. Again, I've covered Africa in many years past, and this is the sort of story that I would regularly uncover of links between a corrupt government, corrupt industrialists, winning contracts globally or even domestically, and a very small number of people lining their pockets with literally billions of dollars. And here we are, again, a potential superpower that should be behaving itself, what should be a democracy, behaving itself. It's doing quite the opposite. Everything that seems to come out of India in the last 14 years has reeked of a banana republic. And it's very, very sad, I would say, for India, because it should be taking a very different path now. It is being welcomed with open arms by Western nations, by the G7 countries. It is being welcomed as a potential force for good in the world. And all it's doing is it's damaging itself. It is holding itself below the waterline, to use a nautical terminology. It's undermining its own credibility, its own potential, purely through a corrupt BJP government that obviously clearly has a very different agenda in mind. That agenda has always been about finance and control. It always stems back to the RSS and ultimately to the Brahmin control. But in that agenda, they are destroying the very thing that they are trying to create, James. It's very sad, really.
It certainly is, Angus, and it's as I said, it's good that the world is waking up to this, and actually the politicians, I'm sure, have known it for decades, but in terms of it getting into the mainstream media, I think that it's going to go a long way to, at very worst, it's going to have to shame them into action. And, you know, we see it when countries get caught with their hand in the cookie jar, where they at least make some level of admission. They go after a scapegoat or a fall guy of some kind and actually take some kind of action, at least in the public eye. And India is not even willing to go that far. And this continues to be an issue when it comes to the drug problem in India, Angus. It's just flowing in through the borders, and it really hits the Punjab state because of the fact that the borders are there. That is basically where a lot of the poppy fields and that from places like Afghanistan are actually making their way through that region. And when you look at the utilization of the drug and alcohol epidemic that's sweeping throughout the country, again, they are just in denial of how bad the problem is, or that they have to take steps to step in and actually help the people of Punjab and the people of the whole country when it comes to addiction. Now, of course, we're looking at various different sources, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to the narcotics issue, you can go back, and we've spoken this before, in the fact that the US at one time, when they had the crack and other drug pandemics or epidemics back in the 80s and 90s, a lot of the areas that you saw it hit the hardest were the inner city communities, where they basically had brought the drugs in and really pushed them in those communities, and really turned a blind eye in some regards until the violence got so desperate You look at areas like Compton, Watts, Crenshaw, where they were getting, mass casualties and mass killings every day. And this is what the Punjab is seeing throughout their regions, is that level of drug use and dependency. Now, of course, this contributes to not only the ongoing issue of the actual usage, but it also, if you take a look, the central government report lists here, when it looks at the high levels of drug use and overdoses, you can see the numbers are astronomical. And it is just a health emergency more than it is even a crime pandemic or epidemic. It needs to be stopped. It needs to be really looked at as a border issue as well at an international scale. So India needs to take steps to acknowledge, recognize, and prevent the drug issue or the drug problems and addiction issues. They need to look at the fact that as young children are also being very influenced into not only the use of drugs, but into the criminality of dealing, running, and even smuggling. So those are major issues. Now, when you look at women and young girls, of course, once they are addicted to these narcotics and the different substances, they are also preyed upon when it comes to human trafficking, and whether that is in the sex trade or being shipped internationally to service different industries as well. It really adds to that. So there is a multifaceted level of corruption that comes along with the drug use. Now, one Punjab governor has taken some steps to make some progress in raising awareness. Now, it's not only awareness that he wants to target in terms of the numbers of users, but he really wants to target the awareness of drugs in themselves and how people can take steps to avoid becoming users or addicts. And again, it is tough when you see a lot of poverty around you, and then you see people that are dealing in the drug trade or using drugs seem to have all of the money, the cash, the rupees, I guess, in India, but also, the nice cars, the gold chains, the beautiful girls on their arms. And that's all fine and dandy for the moment, but chances are in 5 years they're either going to be dead or locked up in prison. So the Punjab governor has launched the Nash Mukt Rangla Punjab, and this is basically a walk and awareness campaign to bring the issue to the forefront and also to bring together various NGOs, government and both at the local and the state level, different agencies and ministries to try to curb and correct what's been going on. Now, we know that the Punjab, of course, is the future homeland of Khalistan, or at least we hope that'll be the case. And the question is India ignoring that region and the drug issue because they want to really push down the people in that region from standing up and having their voice heard when it comes to independence and freedom? So, of course, it could be that the India government is using the drug problem as a weapon against its own people. So this is, again, the statewide People's Walk Against Drugs is engaging different communities all throughout the Punjab, and it really has brought forward an awareness of prevention, of rehabilitation, and to reclaim the Punjab legacy, which we know is so historic and beautiful that it is nice to see that there are steps being taken to go after all of these dealers, of these international gangs, and of course the Indian gangs that are just a constant flow of drugs and addiction throughout their community. They're criminals, they are murderers, and they need to be held accountable for all of this illicit drugs that are flowing in there, Angus.
Yes, we've talked a lot about this drug problem in the Punjab. It's insidious and it's evil, and we've certainly seen here in the West the effect that drugs can have on a community and even a town. I mean, certainly here in the UK, we've got some towns where drugs have have infiltrated the local community and essentially just brought it down to the lowest possible levels of poverty and just horror. It's an evil thing. And really the question has arisen that we've addressed on many occasions: is it a deliberate policy? Is it being used deliberately as a weapon? Is it being weaponized to bring down the society of the Punjab? I mean, one has to question, why has it become so prevalent in the Punjab? Do other states in India have a similar problem at similar levels? It doesn't appear so. But it does seem to be a particular problem in the Punjab. The question is, why? Is that suspicious? Does it raise red flags? Does it point the fingers of accusations at central government saying, why? Why is it the Punjab and nowhere else? Or certainly not to the levels that they're seeing in the Punjab. So that does imply that there is a guiding hand behind it, or at least reasons that that dictate why it would be the Punjab specifically. Because the effect, as we often report, is very clear. It undermines the society. It particularly attracts the youth. The youth are particularly always attracted to drugs because the glamour, the coolness, the etc. And especially when unemployment levels are low and they can't find work and poverty levels start falling, and of course then people just always naturally fall into the escapism of drugs. So they're very seductive in that respect. And then of course the knock-on effect, it spirals downwards. It is a death spiral for a society. And yeah, so the question comes, is it a deliberate policy? And one has to look at, for example, if I refer back to a podcast I did recently, a couple of weeks ago, with Bhajan Singh Binder, we talked, it was Dr. Grewal, we talked about the deindustrialisation of the Punjab. And again, there appears to be a deliberate policy coming from central government in Delhi to deindustrialise the Punjab. And this seems to go hand in hand with what's been happening with the drugs. Because, of course, the deindustrialisation is essentially, it's leaching out industry, it's leaching out commerce and therefore money and investment out of the Punjab, and replacing it with poverty, with economic spiralling downwards, with economic poverty, which means people don't have work, they don't have money to put food on the tables, to keep a roof over their heads. And that in turn brings down society. It brings down the whole levels of social quality of life. And inject excuse the pun, inject the region with drugs as well. And it's a multilateral approach to bring down the whole of the Punjab. You deindustrialise it, you pour in drugs, you make drugs freely available. And what's going to happen? Inevitably. And it's interesting, you look at the right-wing Hindutva social media accounts, and quite often they're always almost gleefully looking at the Punjab, with showing videos and photographs of the increasing lawlessness, the increasing violence, of course, the extensive drug use in the Punjab. They're saying, oh, look what happens, here in the Punjab. Look what's happening with the Sikh community. This is what happens when you don't let the BJP or Hindus control a society. You leave it to the Sikhs, and look what happens. That's how it's being weaponized on social media as well, the outcome of all this. So again, it's deeply insidious. It is really evil. And as you rightly allude to, James, one wonders if this is, and as again we talked about in the podcast, the deindustrialisation of the Punjab seems to be a deliberate precursor. Likewise with drugs, it is a deliberate policy, it is a deliberate precursor, knowing that Khalistan is coming, knowing that it is almost inevitable that Khalistan is coming, because democracy ultimately always wins in the end, without exception. It may take time, but democracy always wins, which means that central government, or actually when I say central government, the RSS Hindutva forces, realise that Khalistan probably is an inevitability. They are fighting against inevitable forces. They know they can't win that. They know it's probably going to happen. So what would they do out of sheer spite is, let's leave it as a wasteland. Let's deliberately use what we call a scorched earth policy, and let's destroy the Punjab. Let's leave them a legacy of a destroyed wasteland of a state, so that when Khalistan is established, let's leave them to a commercial wasteland, a drug-addled wasteland with a society that can barely support itself. That maybe that's their policy. It's deeply evil, James, but I suspect that is the case. And anybody who's tried to stand up against this have met the full force of the law. Ironically, when they tried to stop this huge tsunami of drugs pouring into the Punjab, they've been stopped by law enforcement. They've been detained, they've been arrested and tortured. Yes, we have shown evidence of police torture. Many of my podcast guests have referred to evidence of anybody who stood up and become a rallying force, and I include this in this Amritpal Singh, another gentleman who now resides in Dibrugarh jail for this very thing, for this anti-drug stance. So anybody who stood up against the drug, this inpouring of drugs into the Punjab, has found themselves facing the law of all people. The law have arrested them, detained them, and actually tortured them for their stance against drugs. So that again implies, James, by extension, that there is an agenda here at play. There is something, hidden forces at play behind the scenes who are deliberately steering these drugs into the Punjab for this very effect. I find it deeply evil, and I think it's very clear what's going on behind the scenes, James.
Absolutely, Angus, and that's something that really has to be looked at, and that is the multi-pronged approach that Amritpal Singh sees, and that is that they have to deal with poverty, with education, employment opportunities, law enforcement, border control, and of course, really getting different extracurricular activities, sport, or whatever it is. When the kids are in school and learning, they get out of school, they have something that is constructive with their time, not destructive. And so this project is great because it really brings it to the forefront where so many communities don't openly discuss the drug issues unless it comes to, a counterproduct of talking about crime or mental health or such. But really, to bring a community together, that is a huge start to recognize the problem and start to find multi-pronged solutions to the problem. And as we can see, it's state and local governments that are jumping on board, while the BJP and Modi sit back in Delhi and just deny that there is a problem there. And again, we think that may be a systemic targeting of the Punjab and ultimately Khalistan.
Yeah, spot on. Deny, deny, deny. The phrase that's cropped up a couple of times in today's show. Well, let's use that same phrase to move on to my first story, and I'm going to circle back to this whole deny, deny, deny story of foreign interference. And the BJP, renowned for its quite clever strategic sort of ploys or plots to attack its opposition from every possible angle. And there's been an interesting spat that's developed over recent weeks, and in fact I'd even go as far as say months, between the US and India about foreign interference itself. And it's really come to a bit of a head recently. And I'll refer to one of our correspondents, Permjit Singh, and thanks to him for highlighting some of the recent evidence that's come up on this story that we've actually been keeping an eye on for a while. The BJP posted up just very recently on social media. They said that over the last 4 years, every issue on which the Congress Party has targeted the BJP seems to rely on narratives and supporting material originating from abroad. Issues like, and they talk about some very specific issues like Pegasus Adani, who we talked a lot about, the caste census, democracy in danger, global hunger index, religious freedom, press freedom, etc., all appear to draw heavily from international sources. And as they say, it's something to strongly think about. So what they've implied here is that when anybody has attacked the BJP, and particularly this, specifically referencing Rahul Gandhi, the leader of the opposition of the Congress Party, they're saying, look, where's he getting his evidence from? It all seems to be coming from abroad, and therefore by implication that the BJP is openly really accusing the foreign interference of interfering in Indian domestic politics. And this is actually, and in recent days, this has specifically been honed down to, and they've particularly picked up one area, and it's a slightly complicated story, so I won't go into too much detail about it because we don't really have time. But it does actually highlight just how the BJP are spinning all this sort of evidence that's out there that points in all sorts of different directions, but spinning it into their own little narrative. And we've often talked about how clever that the BJP media machine is. It's ironic when I talk about how clumsy and unsophisticated they tend to be on the international stage. Certainly domestically, they're quite clever. What they are very clever at is spinning a narrative, creating a narrative from all different sources and creating the single narrative. And it's usually a completely false narrative, this misinformation, and then spreading that single core narrative as if it was gospel truth. Now, what they've done recently, and they've actually upset the United States and France in recent days by one of their latest ploys. And they posted up recently, on Twitter, it's always been the United States State Department behind this agenda. And they refer to a French investigative media group, Mediapart, has revealed that the OCCRP, now the OCCRP is the Organised Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. So the OCCRP is funded by the US State Department's USAID, along with other deep state figures like George Soros and the Rockefeller Foundation. In fact, 50% of OCCRP's funding comes directly from the US State Department. OCCRP has served as a media tool for carrying out a deep state agenda. Now, this drips in irony. What they're basically saying is that all these media companies have been funded by a deep state to create a narrative to try to bring down the Modi government. Ironically, it's rather hypocritical coming from the Modi government, who actually are masters at this very same thing. But they are now accusing the United States of colluding with the French to inject some form of fake narrative to try and damage the BJP and in turn bring down the Modi government. They're accusing it's some sort of conspiracy theory that George Soros and the Rockefeller Foundation are actually behind this whole agenda and the US deep state. So, okay, I'll try and put a little bit more flesh on the bones of this story. Now, Mediapart, they came up with an article recently, and they said that this OCCRP, the largest organised network of investigative media in the world, hid the extent of its links with the US government. This investigation can reveal. Washington supplies half of its budget, has a right to veto its senior staff, blah, blah, blah. So basically what's going on here is that Mediapart did an investigation themselves into the OCCRP and discovered that the OCCRP is indeed funded, probably after the investigations, by the US government and other organisations. Now, the BJP jumped on this and said, aha, this implies that the OCCRP is being deliberately funded to come up with anti-Modi narrative. Now, The Wire, another media outlet, got involved in this, and they've actually summed it all up quite neatly into one sort of little article, which hopefully sort of again tries to explain this very complex web that's being weaved, and it starts to now put a bit more of a truthful narrative on what's going on. So the French investigative media outlet Mediapart has condemned the BJP for what it calls exploiting its reporting and stated that there are no available facts to support allegations of a conspiracy involving the US State Department, George Soros and the Indian opposition aimed at destabilising the government. So they're actually saying, look, this whole thing is absolute nonsense that the Indian government has taken all these complex parts to create a false narrative to say that there is this conspiracy theory stemming from the US state to try and bring down the Modi government. So the ruling party in Parliament, the BJP, and on its social media accounts cited Mediapart on another investigative media network, the OCCRP, to accuse Congress and its leaders of targeting Narendra Modi with the alleged backing of Soros and the US State Department. But in turn, Mediapart came back and condemned this instrumentalisation of its recently published investigative article by the BJP in order to serve the BJP's political agenda and attack press freedom, said Mediapart's publisher and director Karine Fouteau. She further asserted that the BJP wrongly exploited Mediapart's article in order to spread fake news that we never published. So what they're saying here is, look, the BJP have taken our investigation and completely misquoted it and spun it completely falsely into a completely different narrative. So they're saying, no, this is not what our investigation was about. Our investigation was about something completely different. It was not about India or Modi, yet the Modi government are now taking our investigation and spinning it into a completely different narrative to blame the US government and Rahul Gandhi's Congress party. She continued, there are no facts available supporting this conspiracy theory. She said, we fully support the courageous Indian and international journalists who report and investigate in India. So last week, BJP lawmakers referred to the Mediapar report to criticise Congress leader Rahul Gandhi in the Lok Sabha, accusing him of colluding with the ACCRP and US billionaire Soros. And I refer back to that original X tweet that I showed earlier on. This was further mirrored in social media posts, with the BJP publishing that very same tweet that went further to directly accuse the US State Department of being part of this conspiracy, as US aid gave substantial funds to the OCCRP. BJP MP Sambit Patra echoed these allegations. The US Embassy in India issued a statement over the weekend saying it was, as they say, disappointing that the ruling party in India would make these kinds of accusations. That is diplomatic speak to say, well, this is outrageous. How dare you say that? And of course, they can only say they are disappointed by this accusation. This is not Mediapar's first encounter with India, or indeed the BJP. Since 2018, the French media outlet has published a series of exclusive investigative reports alleging crony corruption in the sale of 36 Rafale fighter jets to India. At the time, the Indian government and the BJP dismissed these allegations. In its latest report on the Rafale deal, it was published last Christmas, Mediapar accused India of obstructing a French judicial probe into the corruption allegations. So actually what they highlighted was this corruption, and then following it up was that India did its absolute best to try and stop a French judicial probe into this very corruption between the Indian government and this deal for these jets. It is now an established fact the Indian government of ultra-nationalist Prime Minister Narendra Modi is keen to bury at all costs the corruption case concerning the sale of these Dassault-built Rafale jets to India, the outlet wrote. Mediapar's latest investigation into the Amsterdam-based OCCRP relied largely on public documents and filmed interviews given to German broadcaster NDR and several senior US officials. The Mediapar report highlighted that the OCCRP had accepted several US government donations that it is obliged to spend on investigations into certain countries that Washington considers to be a priority matter. Yes, indeed, it was investigating money donated to this organisation by certain countries. It outlined projects funded by US State Department which focused on Russia, Venezuela, tax havens in Malta and Cyprus, and Mexico. However, Mediapar's investigation had no mention of any US State Department grants targeting India. So in other words, there was nothing to do with India in this whole story. It was to do with they were investigating other nations, nothing to do with India. Yet India managed to jump on this whole story and take the conclusions from this investigation and somehow magically apply them as if it's a conspiracy against India, when in fact India was nothing to do with this very investigation to start with. And so the Mediapar actually said on their website that the claims were, quote, simply wrong. OCCRP has no limits on its journalism, no donor influences on our reporting, the media group stated, etc., etc. So basically, the upshot of all this is that India once again has cherry-picked all sorts of information from different sources that refer to completely different stories, spun a completely new narrative, and created a completely false narrative that they're now spreading to attack both the US and their opposition leader Rahul Gandhi, when in fact, in reality, India has been attacked by these very organisations in the past for its corruption. It's linked, and again, James, we've talked about Adani. They've actually raised up other areas, massive areas of corruption. In fact, purchasing of these Rafale jets from France, again, it was mired in deep controversy. It was a multi-billion-dollar deal to supply India with jets. Clearly, the Indian government were involved in a deeply corrupt deal going on that these investigative journalists have highlighted. And India itself tried to get in the way of the French judiciary to stop them investigating this corrupt deal. So again, it's a very complex web, and we don't really have time to go into much more detail on this because unfortunately it does draw into so many different areas. But the upshot, the summary of all this story is, firstly, massive false information, misinformation being spread by the Indian government to attack those who are in turn attacking India for its interference. So what they're doing is they're turning the tables back on their accusers deliberately to try and divert, to distract. It's an old tactic that the RSS have used for many years. It's to distract and divert. When they are caught, when the spotlight of accusation and guilt is placed on India, the first thing they do is turn it around and start spraying accusations against their enemies. Start saying, oh no, it's not us, it's you. You've been interfering in India. It's you who've been corrupt. It's you who've been doing all these sorts of things. In essence, accusing their accusers of guilt of the same things that they themselves are being accused of, James. It is a very typical and it's a very old tactic of India. And here they are once again at their old tactic.
Absolutely, Angus, and it's very interesting because you wonder if he is, or if the India government is doing this on their own, or if there's something else going on behind the scenes with Russia, their government, and the oligarchs there. Because Russia themselves had accused the US of interfering in India's last federal election. So it's very interesting to see that this is coming out, and with the focus on other issues that India is getting caught with, now they're trying to divert the attention away from themselves. And this seems like a good way to do it. But is there also a deeper involvement of the Russians in this as well?
Old allies. I mean, we often talk about it, James. Old allies, Russia and India. Of course, It's no surprise that Russia are going to wade in to defend India. And as we often talk about, that historic tie, that very close tie between the KGB and the Indian government that dates back to partition, 1947 and the years since. It is no surprise. And of course, that increasing alignment between India and Russia, whether it's aligning with the BRICS, whether it's military support or financial support for the Ukraine war. Yeah, those ties run deep and historically, James, as we often talk about.
That's
so
right.
let us move on now, and let's change the subject to another interesting story that's cropped up recently here in the UK. And it's quite a surprise, actually, that it hit the headlines a couple of days ago, that our very own King Charles has stripped a lord of the realm, a British lord of the realm with Indian heritage, stripped him of an honour that he was only bestowed very recently. So let's dig into quite a fascinating story. This guy has been a long-time critic of the Sikh community. He's been quite a nasty character, it would turn out, and essentially he's just another arm of the Hindutva body, it would appear. Now, UK Sikh groups have actually welcomed this decision by King Charles to strip this notorious Indian state propagandist. His name is Rami Ranger. He's actually a Conservative Party lord. So he sits in the House of Lords. That's our second Parliament. We have our House of Commons, is it called, which are essentially the main chamber who come up with. It's the first stage of law creation. It then moves up to the House of Lords, and the House of Lords then either they debate the same laws and they throw it back to the Commons, and we have this sort of strange arcane process in our legislature. So the Lords is appointed. It is not elected. It is appointed, and people are appointed as a lord. And it's become, I have to say, sadly, a very deeply corrupt system. Essentially, and we'll come on to this in this story. Essentially, if you donate enough money to a political party, it's likely that they will reward you because they can then elect you as a lord in this second chamber. And this is essentially what's happened to Rami Ranger. He's donated large amounts of money to the Conservative Party in the past, and in turn, there's been accusations thrown around that he was then elected as a lord, a Conservative Party lord in this second chamber. Anyway, so he was actually awarded his CBE, a citizen of the British Empire, it's called, and he was awarded this by King Charles himself. But King Charles has now stripped him of this CBE for anti-Sikh bigotry. Now, Ranger, who claims to be both a Hindu and a Sikh, bizarrely, has publicly threatened the Sikh community figures with violence if they visit India. He's blamed Sikhs, believe it or not, for the 1984 Sikh genocide, along with a long litany of inappropriate behaviour, including bigotry and harassment. Now, Rangers' attacks on Sikhs critical of India have resulted in years of complaints against this Tory donor. Now, along with Ranger, another gentleman, Hindu Council UK Managing Trustee Anil Banot, has also been stripped of an OB, that's an order of the British Empire, for anti-Muslim bigotry, in a sign of what many will see as a growing acknowledgement of Hindutva extremism here in the UK. Interesting sign of the times. Now, global Sikh lobbyists, Sikh Justice, were cited apparently as the source of this complaint against Ranger. And Rangers long attacked this group as being extremists, of course, for their Khalistan referendum campaign. The Sikh Press Association is among several other pan-Sikh organisations to have reported Rangers' anti-Sikh actions and accusations, and questions about Rangers' very seat in the House of Lords are now being asked. So, in fact, he's not just being stripped of his CBE, this great honour, is that now people are saying, look, he should actually be stripped of his lordship. He should not be allowed to sit in the House of Lords as well. Now, interestingly, who is this guy, Rami Ranger? Now, Baz News, again, who we dip into on a regular basis because they're extremely, I would say, very well-researched, a very knowledgeable organisation, a news outlet. They actually, funnily enough, as they always tend to do, have done in the past great research into this very subject, as they often do on so many subjects that we touch upon. And I'm going to dig out an article that they produced in May 2022, so going back 2.5 years nearly. They already had the sights on this guy, saying, look, this guy is a nasty piece of work. So I'm just going to go through this article and cherry pick a few things that they brought up about this guy. There are only a few people that attract the ire of Sikhs, quite like the UK decision maker and staunch pro-India actor Lord Raminder Ranger, CBE. He was nominated for a life peerage and a seat in the House of Lords in 2019, so it was only 5 years ago. From suggesting that the Sikh genocide was the fault of Southall Sikhs to regularly proclaiming the Sikh gurus worked for the unity of India, his takes on Sikh history, issues and causes are more often than not ludicrous and false. His commentary comes in between regular praises of Modi and loud subservience to the Indian right wing, especially as it pertains to the Sikh community, as well as regularly attempting to malign anything that could be perceived as Khalistani. Yeah, here we go again. He's another one of these figures, Jens, a bit like Chandra Araya. These figures are basically just more stooges of Hindutva. Now, Ranger's father was allegedly assassinated for opposing the formation of Pakistan before the partition of India in 1947. And this apparently happened right around when Ranger was born, but the impact on Ranger himself is clear. He's since released a biography of his father, Nanak Singh, titled Don't Break Up India. There's a clue there to where his loyalties lie. Ranger claims to be a Sikh. However, he also happens to be a founding member of the Hindu Forum of Britain. Now, sadly, I don't have time to go into that, but one day we'll do an article on the Hindu Forum of Britain. Yeah, it's just like we often reported on these similar organisations in Canada and in the United States. They're Hindutva organisations designed to push the Hindutva agenda. He often blurs the line between Sikhi and Hinduism. Yeah, here we go again, this tired old nonsense that Sikhs are Hindus, which again we shoot down on a regular basis. Nonsense. Leaning into, for example, Hindu nationalist rhetoric that Sikhs are part of the Hindu fold and therefore also Indians. So again, it's all part of this agenda where Hindutva try to say that, look, Sikhs are Hindus. Which obviously is nonsense, but they're trying to do this. They're trying to bring them into this nationalist fold, saying, look, you're all Indians, you are Hindus. That's what this whole agenda is about. So Ranger sits at the helm of Sea, Air and Land Forwarding Limited, and another company which is the only company in Britain that's won 5 consecutive Queen's Awards. He's apparently used this success to position himself as the voice on Sikh affairs in the UK. Reports suggest he's donated at least £1.3 million to the UK Conservative Party over a decade. In 2019, the Conservatives, surprise, surprise, finally appointed Ranger as a member to the House of Lords. There were accusations that Ranger's title had come as a result of the cash for peerages scandal. This was a scandal recently where basically there were lots of accusations saying if you pay enough money to a political party, you will be made a lord. Now, for all those of us commoners here in the UK, we've known this for a long time. Our system is deeply corrupt. It is an absolute joke. Keir Starmer, Sir Keir Starmer, is one of many who, unfortunately, we do not recognise. Many of us here in the UK don't recognise this honours system. It's become a joke. It's become a national embarrassment. There are people sitting in the House of Lords. There was a hairdresser, I think, who was appointed as a lord because they were a hairdresser to a past prime minister. These honours are being handed out like rewards out of a cereal packet. You do me a favour, when you're in government, it's basically, you do me a favour and I'll appoint you a lord. It's nonsense. It's a joke. The system is an absolute joke. And many of us have campaigned for years to actually close this House of Lords. It has become a complete farce. It is, rightly as it says here, it's a cash for peerages. Nonsense. The Conservative Party have been just as guilty as the Labour Party, and I point my finger at both parties, and in fact the Liberal Democrats, the third party, likewise. There are people sitting in the House of Lords who essentially have bought their way into that. I've got to be careful what I'm saying because I'm sure I'll get a legal knock on the door for saying a lot of this, but sadly all I'm doing is voicing everything that the British public has known for many years, and this guy is yet another outlet of this. He's been accused of this cash for peerages scandal. So I have no doubt that Sikh organisations will pour their attention now to try and strip him of his lordship as a result of what they reckon is he's also guilty in this cash for peerages scandal. Anyway, I'm off on a sidetrack, another rant in a different direction there. In 2021, a work tribunal hearing ruled that Ranger had victimised and harassed a female employee. So it turns out that the guy himself, even on a personal level, is a pretty, not a very nice person, to put it mildly. Ranger has continued to position himself as a celebratory figure among UK Sikhs. He's even guest lectured at the Centre for Sikh and Punjabi Studies, University of Wolverhampton. Just this week, he suggested through the little-known British Sikh Association, of which he is the chairman, that Sikhs should be rejoicing in his success. So he's a very egotistical guy. And I have to say, I've never heard of this British Sikh Association. It certainly doesn't seem to feature very highly in the community here in the UK that I've got involved in. Funnily enough, the BSA and Ranger were found to be interacting with, tagging and engaging anti-Sikh troll accounts that were later suspended for unleashing a disinformation and manipulation campaign against Sikhs. Oh look, it's the old Hindutva IT cell back in action. Unsurprisingly, Rami Ranger has been involved in that too. The report exposing the depth to which the campaign operated against Sikhs was even covered by the BBC. The fact Ranger and the BSA were interacting with such accounts, even if they didn't know they were fake trolls, exposes their problematic positioning and relationship with actual Sikh organisations, leaders and actors. The reality is, Ranger has become an ever-growing outcast within the Sikh community, gaining notoriety within local community and political spaces. Amongst the most brazen example of his outbursts is a recent tweet threatening violence against Sri Guru Singh Sabha Southall Gurdwara's Harmeet Singh Gill. Yeah. Ranger likes to falsely present support for Khalistan as merely a fringe element within the community. Oh yeah, here we go. It's another one of these Hindutva nonsense agendas saying that the Khalistan movement is a fringe movement, despite the fact that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, certainly in the diaspora, have turned up for the referendum. Yeah, I call that a very large fringe. Ranger replied to a nearly one-year-old tweet from the official Sri Guru Singh Sabha Southall handle, which referenced Khalistan, with a video of Indian police brutally beating Muslim men and the ominous words, "You too could get similar welcome, Harmeet Singh Gill." So it's been essentially, by implication, threatening violence against one of our Sikh community leaders. That's the sort of guy this Rami Ranger is. The Gurdwaras reported the now deleted tweet to London's Met Police and requested an investigation. Recent statements from Priti Patel and Boris Johnson, they were in government at the time of this article, both of whom are conservatives about Sikh extremism in the UK, may share the impact within the party of the Lord's regular cries about Sikh Khalistan militants. So what they're saying is his influence, this Rami Ranger's influence on the government, because of course don't forget he is a massive donor, £1.3 million donated to the Conservative Party. Unsurprisingly, out comes from the Conservative Party these reports saying that, reporting about Sikh extremism in the UK. Yeah, in other words, if I pay you enough money, British government, I want you to label Sikhs as extremists. It's a very transparent agenda going on behind the scenes here. In the end, Ranger is seen by many in the UK Sikh community as the personification of Indian nationalist attitudes, which wants to subjugate Sikh activism, destroy ideas of Sikh sovereignty, and incentivise subservience to the state of India. Protected by a status he may have paid to get, Ranger continues to push a false narrative of widespread Sikh support for the Modi and Hindutva regime, while belittling or outright threatening dissenting voices. It's no surprise then that he's become an absolute outcast within the Sikh world. Well, I'm delighted to report, James, subsequent to this article, 2.5 years later, King Charles has recognised this guy for what he is. He's been stripped of his CBE, and hopefully soon he will be thrown out of the House of Lords. Certainly, he's been bestowed an honour that he does not deserve. He is a Hindutva stooge, very clearly, and I would say that, his punishment is long overdue, and hopefully we will see, and we will report shortly, that he'll also be stripped of his lordship, James.
Yeah, you better watch it, because Prince Charles might just, send him to be roommates with Harry and Meghan in the US.
In the old days, we'd send him to the Tower of London, James.
Even worse, send him to the US. He can be roommates with Harry and Meghan and let them get on with life.
Well, on that terrible note, let us move on swiftly to our comments section. And again, loads of wonderful comments. Thank you to our audience for your hundreds of comments that have been pouring in. And most of them have been really supportive and really lovely comments. And of course, as I often say, very educational ones. So thank you for that. So let's take a look at some of these, James. Avatar Singh starts with, we talk about Sukhbir Singh Badal, who faced, I was going to say, the wrath of the Akal Takht. I wouldn't say it was wrath. In fact, many commenters have said it wasn't exactly wrath that he faced. It was more of a sort of wet slap on the wrist. But anyway, Avatar Singh says, didn't Badal have the Jatadar of the Akal Takht dismembered by the butcher police after being arrested because he stood up to the Sikh genocide? Now, this refers back to the terrible story that we touched upon with Govinda Singh Kunkay, that was, I beg your pardon, Govinda Singh Kunkay, the acting Jatadar of the Akal Takht, who was brutally murdered and tortured by the Indian state. And Avatar Singh says that didn't Badal himself get involved in this, and saying it was basically on his instructions that the Jatadar was taken away. It's quite a shocking accusation. And again, it just implies once again this complex but dirty web, this network of control that the RSS have had over the Punjab via the Badals, from the RSS down to the Badals, down to the Shiromani Akali Dal, the SGPC and so on. And Grewal Sukhwinder likewise follows this same theme. The Badals have been another face of the Indian state in terms of treating Sikh issues. No justice has been delivered during their 2 decades in power. Sikh Sangat is extremely upset the way they handle each and every issue. So again, likewise, that the Sikh community are rising up in anger, saying, look, these guys, these Badals, have had too much control for too long, and they've been essentially ignoring the genuine issues of the Sikh community. And likewise, Hap B follows, again, the same theme. And coming back to Govinda Singh Kunkay, he was the head, and the police came and picked him from his home. The villagers all witnessed him being taken away. Some eyewitnesses that were in prison say how badly he was tortured. Don't forget, and I'm going to put this back into perspective, James, this guy was one of the most senior people in the Sikh religion, the Sikh faith. It's an equivalent to an archbishop of the Christian faith or a senior imam in Islam being taken away by the police and tortured. Again, I've got to put this to how significant this was at the time. The police denied picking him up, said they didn't know where he was. They even said he ran away when people said both of his legs had been broken and he had an eye missing with torture. The Badals knew all of this. They hid the report, they protected the killers, and they promoted them in their jobs. And again, implying how deeply embedded in this dreadful state corruption that's been going on, that the Badals were involved in this. And thank you, Hat B, for correcting my pronunciation. It is pronounced Kunke, as you rightly say. And then finally, God is One says, this is another drama created by Sukhbir Badal. And Achar Sengil said he'll milk this to his full benefit. And they're actually implying that the whole thing is just another ploy by the Badals. It's just a drama created to increase their egotistical profile. May well be, James, but it's very clear that the Badals have dominated Punjabi politics for far too long, have they not?
Absolutely. And now that it's recognized, that's great. But of course, we're going to see a continued push because of their power, influence, and the long-term presence. We're going to see a lot of people coming out to try to also defend them, which, we know who that is. So
yeah, indeed. And then, of course, the story took quite a dark turn shortly afterwards when the Akal Takht proclaimed his saver. He had to sit outside with that placard around his neck. And then, of course, Narain Singh appeared, well, allegedly, we believe it's him, appeared with a pistol to try and assassinate him. And interestingly, here's a comment from LCFC who says, Sikh justice. Now, absolutely. Now, I think, and we debated this at length in an earlier show, this is indeed Sikh justice. If you live by the sword, be prepared to die by the sword. This was Narain Singh. Basically taking justice into his own hand in the way that Sikhs have for centuries past. If you cross our paths, if you stand up for injustice, then face the wrath of the Sikh community. And this is what Narain Singh has done. He basically said, look, you've crossed us once too many times, and I'm going to take your life for this. And LCFC rightly points out, this is Sikh justice. And in fact, the following comment again from Hat B says, it says, good work explaining how the RSS is creating all this drama, only to blame Sikhs again. Narain Singh acted out the anger and disappointment felt by Sikhs all over the world on this decision. And as you rightly point out, is that the Sikh community for decades has faced this terrible suffering, this terrible persecution. How would you expect them to react? So essentially, it is, I wouldn't say it's justifying, it's certainly explaining. It is explaining why Narain Singh would be so motivated through such deep historic anger of all the suffering that the community has been subjected to for so many decades. It explains why he would risk his own life and stand up with a pistol and try to shoot this guy, James. So one can completely understand. We don't support violence, but we can understand why this gentleman would be so motivated to take this guy's life, Badal's life.
Absolutely. And there's breaking news also, Angus, in relation to that story, in that they do suspect that he may have actually been working with two others. But the main intelligence high up at the state level is looking to take over the investigation from the Amritsar police because they feel that there may have actually been police officers involved in corruption and involved in the attempted assassination or the shooting there. So
well, James,
we'll keep our eyes on that story, but that was breaking news that I caught just before the show.
Indeed, as they say, the plot thickens. We'll have to keep our eyes on developments on that story. 1S1 and 2 says the leadership of the Akal Takht is no different now. It's just another drama to try and fool the Sikh community, thinking that there is some sort of reset going on and that this is a line being drawn by the Badals. How ridiculous is that a murder of Sikhs and someone who's always betrayed the Panth is given just simply saver as a punishment? This is an insult to Sikh principles. And what you're saying here, and I think this is supported by many people amongst the community, is that this excuse me, this so-called punishment is nothing. It's a slap on the wrist. After everything that the Badal family have done against the Sikh community, all that the Akal Takht can do is just basically just humiliate him to some degree. And that's it. That's the only punishment that he's faced after everything that he's been accused of and his father had been accused of. And I think this is probably right. I think this is why Narain Singh, out of sheer frustration, said, look, If that's the only punishment that you can give, then we have to take justice into our own hands and actually punish him, in fact, in the way that he actually genuinely deserves. And I think this comment, 1S1 and 2, I think really just personifies the anger from the community saying, look, he deserves more than that. If that's the only punishment, that is just not good enough. One then has to point, or at least put the spotlight on the Jathedar of the Akal Takht who pronounced this and say, look, why is this the only punishment? And of course, when in our show earlier last week, when we looked at that hierarchy descending down from the RSS down to the Badals and the Shiromani Akali Dal, who in turn control the SGPC, who in turn control the Akal Takht, and indeed effectively indirectly appoint that Jathedar of the Akal Takht, one wonders if the Jathedar, when he pronounces punishment, was under some degree of pressure from, ironically, the Badals themselves, the family, to say, yeah, do a nominal punishment, just enough to sort of say that he's been punished, but actually don't really punishment at all. And I think that really is probably what's been going on behind the scenes. Once again, is that it's just smoke and mirrors, James, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I mean, just to look at public humiliation as a punishment for such serious and atrocious crimes that he's participated in or been involved in, it's just a joke of a system, and it definitely needs to be changed.
And one wonders, are things just going to go back to the way they were? Once this is all blown over, the Badals are going to carry on the control of the Shiromani Akali Dal, likewise of the SGPC, etc., etc. So nothing's actually in reality changed. It will all blow over. People's memories are short, not the Sikh community's memories, but everybody else's memories are short, and things will ironically carry on as normal. We'll see. Well, we'll follow that story.
Absolutely no deterrence there, Angus.
Right, and then our final set of comments, and I'll give this first one to Ashley Kandar, who says, a daily dose of baloney, Ashley. Yes, Ashley, one of our favourite critics. Very amusing and entertaining, though. Is this a new genre of comedy, James? I think we are pioneers in what we do, clearly.
Oh, absolutely,
Thank you, Ashley, for your regular contribution on that. Ganinda Singh Gill says, I always believe that truth will prevail. You both have calmed my internal agony facing this nonsense that Sikhs are terrorists, which I 100% disagree. Absolutely right. Of course they're not terrorists, this nonsense narrative perpetuated by Hindutva and the Indian state. We Sikhs have always stood and will always stand against injustice and cruelty. Absolutely. That is why you are a target as a community, simply because of that noble stand. I salute you both, thank you, in the search for the truth, to honour my Sikh brothers and sisters who are the warriors to defend and farmers for food injustice. Absolutely. And your thought for the day, which I think is very profound, I am you, you are us, and us is all, so we are one. Basically, in other words, I think to summarise that one, James, is saying we're all equal. Indeed, that is one of the central tenets of the Sikh philosophy, is that we're all equal. Essentially, we all come into this world as the same, and we all leave this world as the same, I think. It's very philosophical.
Absolutely, and just be thankful that I'm not wearing the same outfit I came into the world or that I'm going out in.
That is something we would much rather not see, James. But who knows? Who knows what our fan base may think? Maybe they think otherwise. We'll see.
We just had to make a joke for our last commenter there,
Akash Deep Singh says, thanks. When the Punjab will be free, which hopefully will be in the foreseeable future, there will be a system of education in schools. Sikh children will study history in the books, and you two will be there in Sikh history forever. I think you flatter us, Akash Deep Singh. That is a very kind comment. I think our contribution is minuscule compared to the thousands of, shaheeds, the thousands of people who have literally risked their own lives to stand up to what was rightly said, to stand up against injustice and cruelty. There are many, many heroic and courageous figures in this community who we salute on a regular basis and we regularly refer to. We honestly don't have time enough to honour the many that really deserve that recognition. They will be the ones who will rightly take the place in these history books. And yes, absolutely, we do look forward to that day when the Punjab will be free, do we not, James?
Absolutely we do, and we can't wait to visit.
And hopefully, yes, maybe we will form a little afterwards somewhere in the index at the very back. Our names might just be listed in a tiny little bit, and for that I'll be happy and satisfied that we have done our little bit, James.
But we could be known as the first talk show host to be there live when the new sign that says "Welcome to Khalistan" is unveiled.
Absolutely, as we've said, James, regularly, when Khalistan is established on that first day, on the day of independence, we will be there reporting live from wherever it may be.
That's right.
And the final word of the day goes to Amrit Singh, who says, Khalistan will indeed be like a breath of fresh air, not just for the Sikhs, but for the whole world. Sikh ideology unites the human race. It celebrates diversity. We couldn't finish on a much more truthful or positive note on that one. So absolutely, and thank you for that comment. But unfortunately, there you have it. That was Perspectives. We must draw things to a close for another day. Please don't forget to keep these comments coming in. They've been pouring in by the hundreds and they've been wonderfully supportive and really interesting to read. So do keep them coming. Thanks very much indeed for all of them. And don't forget, you can message us directly like many of you have indeed been doing at message@satellitestv.com if there's anything you'd like to bring to our attention, any stories that we might have missed that you think we should be covering. So thank you for those as well. But in the meantime, that is it for another day. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
We will see you next time.